Portal-Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Thank you. I'm pleased to take a call on this bill. Sir, I want to raise a couple of points which I don't think have been fully explored by the other speakers. One of the things I want to explore, because this is a very important bill, protecting our children from exploitation is one of the most significant things that we can do as a house, supporting the safety of our kids. But what I'm a little disturbed about, sir, is the timing with which this bill, its passage through the various stages, not actually giving submitters, I don't feel, sufficient time to actually prepare submissions and be aware of the bill and actually make submissions to this bill. I hear from other contributors to this that there are less than a dozen submitters. When we think about the work that's already come to this House, for example, on the Vulnerable Children's Bill, or on the funding for sexual violence services, sir, and this is a bill that has the calibre to protect our children in the same vein that those two other bills do, sir. I'm disturbed and confused as to why there were not more submitters, and I feel that it's unfortunate that it's because of the timing of this. I know that there would have been groups who would have liked to have had the opportunity to present submissions on this, because this is a significant issue. It's an issue that goes to the heart of protecting our children, and it's an issue that tends to go under the radar, because a lot of the activity that this bill addresses happens in the privacy of one's own home, away from the view, the eyes of the wider public. But we all know that it occurs. This is a serious bill about the offences relating to child pornography. Let's not dress this up. The bill does go some way to looking at the penalties, the maximum penalties for the manufacture, possession, supply, distribution of this material. But it relates really to, if there was no consumer, there would be no manufacture. So we also have to look, sir, at what we are doing to prevent, as I said in my previous piece tonight, what are we doing to prevent the harm from happening in the first place? I know this bill doesn't deal with that, but the wider issue is that we need to look at prevention before we deal with actually the harm of that is caused by this bill. Earlier on tonight we talked about, in the parole amendment bill, we talked about the impacts of offending on victims, and we need to remember the victims when we are working and dealing with bills such as this. So I want to also look to the discussion that was had, and there's been quite a fruitful discussion across the House, I guess. And yes, sir, the report that came back from the Select Committee was about majority view. New Zealand First has taken a slightly different view in terms of the penalties, and I agree that that's definitely an issue that we need to look at. One of the matters that was raised, sir, was around the relativity of this offending to physical harm, and I understand that someone has already made the comment that the production of this material could also result in the physical harm of children. So I agree that there is some discussion to be had around the relativity of penalties imposed around the development of this objectionable material and regarding the physical harm to children. So I agree that there's more discussion that is needed with that. With regard to Clause 5 and the possession of electronic publications, sir, I also look at some of the contributions that were made that want to also include the discussion around the harmful digital communications bill, because we are looking at material that could potentially sit in both areas. And it concerns me that we do have legislation, Sue, that possibly can cover both situations. Would it not have been more sensible to look at overarching legislation that captured all of those experiences and situations rather than have two? I think that's possible, an opportunity for us to discuss that. I noticed that Vodafone made a submission around the possession of electronic publications, and I think that's right. It's interesting that they were the only ISP to do so. I know that within the electronic publications arena there are also modern applications that we all have access to on our smartphones and other devices, which potentially throw us into a position of having that material on our device, even though we may not have initiated it. We all know about Snapchat and the material that comes to us unwittingly, and there have been several high-profile people who've been caught out with material that has been forwarded without their knowledge. Sir, Clause 13, creating the new offence under the Crimes Act of indecent communications with a young person. I agree it closes a very big gap in terms of the issue around grooming of children, and it is a very useful addition to our arsenal in terms of supporting children. Grooming of children and then taking the next step and actually arranging to meet children, I know was discussed in a previous bill that came before the House last week, I believe. And it's an interesting issue. Again, I go back to we have part of the concern here in this bill. We have it addressed in another part in another bill, and we should consider really tidying up the issues rather than having part of the offence in one and part in another bill. So I noticed too, sir, that there was some discussion around the actual definition of indecent, and a discussion that it appears often in the Crimes Act that there is a note made that there's well-established body of case law around the definition of indecent, but modern times should cause us to rethink that. And I actually would want the work that continues on this to actually consider that, sir. So I just also want to refer back to what I said earlier about prevention. It seems to me, sir, that the wider context about many of the bills that we've seen recently speak to the social mores that this modern world brings to us, and how we can actually protect people from this offence in the first place. So I look forward to the discussion, sir, where we are able to look to those matters of prevention rather than dealing with the offence in the first place. Thank you, sir.
The next call is a split call, I understand. Sarah Dowie, 5 minutes.